Boom! What's up, everyone? Welcome to Simulation. I'm your host, Alan Sakian. Super excited to be talking about thriving futures, to be talking about creating a world that works for all beings in the shortest amount of time. We have Maya Zuckerman joining us on the show. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me here. So excited.
Yes, we are very grateful for your work and for your passion, what you're bringing to our world. And for those that don't know Maya's background, regenerative entrepreneur, futurist, the COO of Veme, which is a next-gen social video network. And we're gonna be talking about that. I love that, about creating the world that works for all beings in the shortest amount of time. That is so beautifully said. It's kind of like the pinnacle goal of civilization. And so, okay, we like talking about things on a big history perspective to start. So here we find ourselves as stewards of Earth after a period of evolution, and boom. What is your current synthesis on the state of humanity?
So you use the word stewards. We're not there yet. I feel we're still in the adolescent stage. I mean, what adolescents clean up the room? None. Look at the state of the world. We're in this kind of, some of us are preteen, tween maybe, and all of a sudden got all this power. And we're actually haven't adulted enough to get to this point. I mean, it's funny that 30s and 40-year-olds use the word adulting. We know there's a problem when that's in our framework. So, you know, we have this amazing Goldilocks planet. I mean, we go out to the other universe to actually look for Goldilocks places, or other galaxies to look for Goldilocks planets, and we're standing on a Goldilocks planet. And we forgot that. I really, truly believe that we forgot this is home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been using the words ethical kindergarten. That's kind of still where the stewardship is kind of like a slow process of getting to become more like, kind of like grandparents of the proper wise stewards of Earth. It's taking us a little longer to get there. Maybe it is even possible that the civilizations prior to us had greater spiritual wisdom to their connectedness to Mother Earth, and then it's kind of been lost. Through this massive population and exponential technology boom. Would you say that's true?
I mean, there's been a few. I mean, no wonder we're using frames like falling from grace, and have this nostalgic memory for places that were before civilization. That was our paradise. The fall from grace was moving from this hunter-gatherer communities into civilization. And there was a fall, there was literally a break. And we've also systematically actually dislocated. You know, we've killed off people. Indigenous people, indigenous tribes around the world have been suffering for 500 years from colonialism. Even before that, for the past 10,000 years, I believe we made a decision that some people are better than others, and we've actually encoded that into our narrative. You see it in Judeo-Christian narratives of the hero's journey, even though that hero's journey is just a very slim part of the real narrative that's been there. And you see it also in how we've actually removed ourselves from others, from our tribes, from people, from nature, from one another. We forgot that we belong to each other, we belong to the planet, that we're not actually 100% human, we're like 10%, and the rest of it is microbiome and connectedness through all these kind of organisms that are making these communities. So we actually created a very myopic narrative of our place in the world, and we've done it systematically. And all of a sudden we're in this moment right now where we're remembering the past and the future together. Like we actually have a memory of the future of what we could be, and a memory of the past where we're still aching. And no wonder we're seeing huge amounts of indigenous leaders around the world stepping up to remind us of the past so we can remember the future together.
Yeah, that's so well said. You're mentioning earlier too the notion that this is such a gorgeous planet that we have as our home, and it's because we find ourselves in this gorgeous Goldilocks zone, this perfect distance from the star that made life happen for us. And just the gratitude as we look at Venus and Mars, and we're just like, wow, how lucky is it that we are right here? And just that sense of gratitude. And then following up on your point here, you know, we just had a friend, Stephanie, in, and she was teaching us about what was happening down in South America with some of the Amazonian indigenous people. And it's so unfortunate. Like you've been describing now, it's been this trajectory of colonialism, this superiority complex that we have, that we're suffering because of our deep ego and our deep greed and our deep dehumanization of other people for economic superiority and gains that end up being meaningless when we go and we aim to get these materialistic possessions, these extra things outside that don't actually bring any fulfillment or meaning to our lives. The deep human connections and actually seeing a flourishing world brings that to us. Now, you bring up the indigenous people, and you bring up being able to learn from them and integrate this holistic sense of communion with nature, with earth, back into our value system to move forward. Yeah. Teach us about that.
Yeah, so I mean, everything we can learn from the planet. I mean, we've created amazing things by observing, and then all of a sudden something happened and we just went exponential. The thing is, we can't grow continually growing exponentially because nothing on the planet does that. Like, things actually are in balance. So I think the first thing is, let's look back into biomimicry and look at what the planet does to regenerate itself, to actually create an equilibrium, to actually have flourishing and thriving ecosystems. I mean, if we look at our cities, I mean, everything came out from our own stories, right? Like, even this mug here is a story, right? If somebody had an idea of how to hold like our ancestors, how do I hold liquid? How do I hold warm liquid? And all of a sudden we have mugs of all shapes and sizes and, memes on them, and all of a sudden they're a cultural reflection of who we are. Just this mug, right? Yes. Times all of this. So we've always, been very great at storytelling as an animal, but we've actually forgot to tell the story of the planet. Like, we deem that not as important versus our own stories. So I think one of the things is honoring the planet and then reflecting back to what she wants to teach us. I'm very much about the Mother Earth.
Yes.
And she's trying to tell us something. One of the things that she's trying to tell us pretty much in our faces, and we're still wondering, wait, what is she trying to say here? And I'm gonna say a feminist joke. It's the guy's not listening to the woman again. Like, come on, she's screaming at you. We're behaving like viruses. We're just exploding everywhere. And when we have a viral infection in our body, the first thing that happens is we get a fever. It's exactly what's happening to the planet. It's getting a fever so she can actually deal with us as we've changed our narrative, we've changed our behavior from being a species that's part of the equilibrium to something that's out of nature, reflecting back. And I don't think that we're going to be allowed to stay here for this much longer. And I don't think we're going to be allowed to actually go on another planet. I think we're kind of in this in-between land until we grow up and actually learn from the thriving systems, the ecosystems that are here. They're amazing. This is 4.4 billion years of brilliance. Yeah. We think we know it all. Oh my God, no, we don't know how to create us. Like, she's created us. That's evolution for you. Yes. And that's so much information. We're only scraping it. So, I think humility and Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about the cosmic perspective. So the cosmic perspective is when you actually gain that perspective of the cosmos looking back here, and we only gain that through science. I mean, that's something I'm very much about, the scientific method, but when we bring back the humanity, when we bring back the awe, the cultivation of awe, and astronomy is like that, right? We only gained the awe of us as part of this planetary system after 1968 and 69 and 72, the first satellite that brought in the whole Earth catalog, so satellite image of Earth, and then Earth Rising 69, and then 72 is the blue marble. So literally within 3 years or 4 years, we gained what we look like from the outside. That's only been about 51 years. That's crazy. We've only actually had that knowledge. We should not be expected to be that adult because we've only learned that we're really part of this ecosystem. So we need more time to mature and maybe hit the brakes a little bit on the exponentials, because it's this, like I run startups. Any startup knows that there is a place between the time you run out of gas and you actually get your product to market. And in that time, you're going to die. So we're literally in that time between we're going to run out of gas for this planet to actually sustain us, and before we actually learn how to truly evolve as a species. And we've got a window that's like 11 years, maybe, and then it's closing. And it really is about all of us, all hands on decks, waking up and going, and waking up, growing up, cleaning up, and showing up, because waking up is not enough anymore. And we can talk about it in a bit.
I love that.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, your synthesis on things is really powerful.
Thank you.
It's really strong. And you bring a lot of, I love how you bring the cosmic perspective. I love how you bring the indigenous wisdom perspective. I love how you bring even the economic and political flows today, and how we need to fix some of the roots of these issues and upgrade to the 2.0 systems. I'm loving it, Maya. I'm loving it.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, the cosmic perspective is a huge aspect to our awakening. Like, here's our little blue marble where we've all lived and died, 100 billion of us that built civilization. And now we see, of course, some of the things that we do on this rock are acting as a, the way you describe it, it's hard for us to admit that in some ways we are being a little viral, we are being a little parasitic. And one may even argue and say it's completely parasitic, and it's really hard for humans to feel that in their bodies, that we are throwing things out of equilibrium, and that the fever is here now, and the fever is like, what are we going to do to fix this equilibrium? And so that's happening. And you also gave this this super cool wise man or wise woman sees a different tree, or in this case a mug, than a fool that is a man or a woman. Because when you look at it, you can just say that there it is, or you can have the full perspective of the thousands of years of humans realizing that they wanted to keep water in these mug-shaped, bowl-shaped contraptions, and so just like with the tree system, you can see the roots and you can see the leaves, the animals, and the sunlight that goes in the photosynthesis that occurs, everything.
Exactly.
So I'm really loving now you ended on these steps, right? Yeah, go ahead and teach us about the steps. So
not mine. I always bring in awesome people's words. So the integral thoughts, Ken Wilber and the other integrals talk about an awesome formula. And I mean, we've got a little Buddha here. Awesome formulas are not an invention of the 20th and 21st century. He gave us like a bunch of them, like 3 pearls, 4 noble truths, 8-fold path. Really succinct.
Super good.
Very, very simple, right? So let's get back into simplicity from the complexity. So they talk about waking up, growing up, cleaning up, and showing up. So I have an article I talk about waking up, because everybody's like, oh, we gotta wake up. And I think the only people who get really what waking up is Black Lives Matter uses the concept of stay woke, which means, waking up is an actually practice. Staying woke is a practice. This is not like, I wake up and everything's okay. So I'm going to take it even deeper. Some of my favorite sages are the Wachowski siblings. Used to be the Wachowski brothers, now they're Wachowski sisters. Amazing.
Yeah.
Mind blown, right?
Yeah, mind blown, for sure.
So The Matrix, you remember The Matrix?
For sure.
So what happens to Neo when he wakes up? He wakes up in a pod. And he literally has a purging moment from a lot of spiritual narratives and spiritual ceremonies. The concept of purge literally goes like that, blah. And then things dislocate from him, and then he gets washed down the drain into the sewage. So it sucks. And he wakes up to seeing darkness all around him, and people are enslaved. And then the Nebuchadnezzar and Morpheus pick him up with the robotic arms, and they dry him up. And then he's still eyes blurry. He asks Morpheus, why don't my eyes work? And he says, because you've never used them. Mm-hmm. So that's waking up. And I think everybody's kind of stuck on this. It's like, no, that's like we're kind of stuck in like oh, waking up is so wonderful. No, it sucks, because you wake up to reality and you're like, shit, how do I deal with this now? And then the growing up is maturity, is, you know, part of a step that we need to take is grieving. And as a Western society, we don't know how to grieve. We have no idea what to do with friends of ours that are losing it. They're like, oh, we're like, oh, it's not that bad. It's gonna be okay. And it's like, no, it sucks. Like, let's sit with that. Let's go through our process by ourselves and collectively of what we are responsible for. Maybe not we created, we were born into this. I'm not specifically decided that I want to go and kill the Amazon and rip the earth of minerals and use fuels to run planes. I was born into that situation, but I'm responsible for that. And that's a little kind of place where it's really difficult to sit with. So we got to do that work.
We are responsible for that. You can't take the blame yourself. That's quite admirable, Maya, but we are
responsible. Yeah, we are collectively responsible.
So I just don't put it all on you, Maya. There's only so much you can do. And, but thanks for being you, nevertheless.
Yeah, and it's not an easy thing. And that's why for us to actually do the external work, we all have to go and do our shadow works. It's kind of funny where the shadow always has company on this poster over there.
That's right.
We always have our shadows. This is not new. This is 2,500 years, Buddha, Jesus.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
The comparison to a binary star system, to a 2-star system, then you have a good and an evil.
Yeah.
You have that shadow self that's with you all the time, and that way when you tap into the current state of...
It's not evil.
It's not evil.
Isn't evil.
It's just shadow.
It's just shadow.
It's just shadow.
Well, if one can say whatever is happening with the forces that are at play that are pushing things in the direction of up, that are synergizing, however one wants to describe those things. But when one awakens and then further stays awakened, this is what you're teaching. The process of doing this is at times, like you described, it is not necessarily a process that people think feels great.
It's probably, most probably, all the time kind of sucks. And I use the word suck a lot here because it's not easy. And for us to actually get, as humans, even just if let's remove the calamity we're in and the challenges, just as a human, being in this world is hard, you know, and as a society, just that, how do we show up in our lives for ourselves and for our families and community? Just that is a lot of work. Then what is asked for us as a society and as a species is do our internal work and our collective work at the same time really fast. It is the question of the times, I think. I really truly believe it, and I see that, and no wonder all of a sudden there's this resurgence of anything from self-help to indigenous healing practices all around the world for us gringos to come in because we're so hurting, and you can actually hear from the indigenous leaders what they're seeing. And they're seeing this pain, this shadow, this Weteko in us that has been eating us, our soul, because we forgot that we're connected to the planet. And it's literally in us, and we feel it. We feel it when we walk down the street. We feel, you know, I'm walking down the street in San Francisco on Market Street. It's dystopia here.
It is. In a lot of ways it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just a concrete jungle. In Manhattan, there's not even any trees or sunlight. It's just 40-story concrete buildings. Yeah. And it's gotten, and then the light.
Do that again with your face. I want to get a close-up shot on that.
40-story concrete buildings, and there's no trees, and there's barely any sunlight that can come in there. And then the humans that are laying on the streets, that we walk by, that we have decided that we don't have time in our busy lives to address this issue.
Yeah.
And then the indigenous people that are screaming, connect to earth, feel your hearts, look at each other's eyes, realize the infinity that you come from and how blessed we are to be here and solve this problem of what's going on the planet before we get to points of further catastrophe.
Exactly.
To actually get to the point where we can leverage the beautiful tools, these law of accelerating returns that we have to actually do things like monitor our biometrics and have preventative medicine, take us into the space economy and beyond. Doing all these cool things enables us to grow up and stay woke, stay awakened for a long sustained period. And the process feels like this because you gain the understanding of the code. We talk about the code a lot. And when you realize the variables, approaching 8 billion of us, everyone's aiming to live like a meat consumer, a high energy fossil fuel burner. Having procreation is important because it brings us meaning, adding more humans. We want to burn through our clothes and our degradables that don't biodegrade in a couple days, but they take months or even years to biodegrade in oceans. So I'm happy that you have you're very polymathic in your understanding. You hit a bunch of edges of knowledge of the way that you synthesize these points. But the center of it is, I believe, and tell me if I'm right here, is this sort of like ancient Gaia, this ancient wisdom of Pachamama, of Mother Earth, and how to best harmonize with her as we move forward as a unity.
Yeah, completely. And as my dear friend Joe Brewer says, reminding ourselves what it means to be human, like literally dropping down with each other and reminding ourselves of a future that is here, because we know that time's really not linear. So we've already seen that future, and it's very interesting for me that only a few of our awesome mainstream culture narratives are of this positive future. And you can name them on like one hand, and most of the other ones are connected to our limbic brain, our fight and flight, or the dystopian ones. And it's a repetitive in not in our 20th century, 21st century narrative. Look at the ancient Bibles that we have, all of the Bibles, from the Hindu to the Jewish and Christian ones, all talk about apocalypse, all talk about that concept. But apocalypse in the ancient terms is not the end, it's an end of an epoch. It's an end of a moment and a beginning of a new one, and we're in that. That's what it feels so uncomfortable, because we are birthing something new. Might be our end. We might be birthing our end, and if we're doing that, that's always something that is possible. Maybe we should consider.
Did you say birthing the end?
We may, and
yay! Ron is excited now. Yay! Birthing the end, but the thriving future options.
As well. But I'm going to go back to the end for a second and entertain me here, because one of my favorite ways of a species to leave a time is the elves in Lord of the Rings. There's an honor and maturity about it, and going, well, let's actually leave the place better than we found it before we leave. So let's get on the big war to help everybody, because we're going to stay. Some of us are going to stay to actually take care, steward the next epoch. So that could be an option. And then there's a thrivable future option, which is that's the Goldilocks timeline. Can we get to the timeline that's not too hot and not too cold? Really, truly, and that's not big enough and not too small, not too technological, and not too, hippie utopian. Something that works for everybody. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody, like the bees, the whales, the elders. I'm a part of this wonderful course called Speak the Spark, Sacred Storytelling, and we had this amazing, Leah Lam facilitates it, and we had this amazing elder from Hawaii, Kalani, and he asks the 3 questions for a thriving society. Are the grandchildren fed? Are the grandparents comfortable? Are the women unafraid? And when we kind of dissected each one of them, fed means the children, fed, it could be food, it could be education, it could be a good space for children and grandchildren, the youngest ones. Comfortable for grandparents means that as they age and they're more disabled or need more help, they're always comfortable. Comfortable means they have enough food, a place to stay, somebody to take care of them, somebody to speak to, they're not lonely. And then our women aren't afraid. Yeah, I walked in San Francisco, I'm never feeling very comfortable. And I remember somebody even writing, what about the men? They're like, they're in the grandparents and they're in the grandchildren. So men are actually in those two. But I think for women or anybody that's not in the place of the stronger male authority, that is really important. And I think that is part of, for community-based, not only for nature, is how we start building that. Because we need to come in from, before we try to fix the outside, fix the inside, how are we doing within our communities?
Yes, yes. That trust and safety is so critical. There's an interesting analogy for men, is that if men had these 7-foot alien creatures that were down here and just constantly wanting to fuck us, and doing whatever they want to pressure us into wanting to fuck them, and like we would have to also really be how can we be safe, etc. So there's ways to try and put yourself behind the eyes of these imaginary scenarios where you can be like, okay, I get it, like I don't want to be preyed on like that, like let's find a better communion between each other. And that's just one of many points that you listed. I'm a little bit interested, actually I'm a lot interested in this from you. I'm very interested about it for myself, and I'm interested in it for other people. I'm trying to figure out how to disseminate this to other people. This idea of staying woke is different for different people. This idea that there are so many ways up this mountain. Some people use meditation, some people use psychedelics, some people use different sorts of communion where they just go out into nature bathing and forest therapies and all different other styles of pursuits in this way. Deep eye gazing, there's so many. What do we just explore these? Do we just explore these as adults and kids? Is that an optimal way to try and get to the stay woke mentality? What would your optimal ways be?
I think also intersectionality and culture, because it's great that we go out and wake up, but what are we waking up for and what are we actually doing about it? And if we just get into this, because I see that a lot as well, is like, oh, let's go and drink more ayahuasca, do more of that, do more of it, more of it, more of it. And then at the end of the day, the person's an asshole to other people. Are you woke? How are you actually practicing it in society? How are you actually treating people? How are you actually treating the land? What are you actually putting into your body on a daily basis? Like, you're going to be doing a shamanic diet before going to Peru, and then you come back and you just feed yourself with fast food, fast media, not caring, not actually being active in your community. Like it's more than that. And that's why I said, I brought in Black Lives Matters, because the Stay Woke is their hashtag that they use, because they practice community. They practice waking up people on a daily basis for what's happening and keeping them accountable. And I think that's why we need to then do the steps. It's not only stay woke, it's literally growing up and going, shit, we did this. Doesn't feel good. But acknowledging that this is not okay to continue. And then beyond that, then cleaning up after us, cleaning up the ocean, cleaning up our behavior, cleaning up relationships that are toxic, between genders, between different
races and religions.
I don't want to say racist is such a problematic word, because it doesn't actually exist. It's a narrative that we created, that there are the races, but we're going to say racism because that's the framework we created. So that's the cleaning up, and then showing up. It's showing up for yourself. It's showing up for your community. It's showing up for a climate, for the climate, and for ones who cannot speak. That's the showing up. That's why we do a march for the planet, we do a march for the earth, because we do, we're being the Lorax, we speak for the trees because they can't speak, right? In our language, in our human language. They have their own language.
Totally.
In the human, let's call it the humanistic language, or the human language, not, which is probably very, I believe the human language is probably not very diverse. If we actually knew how to speak to a tree, we would find out that they speak in like the heptapods in Arrival. They speak in 360 in a non-linear way, and we're like trying to actually create a narrative that goes in linear thought. So maybe that's part of our problem.
What the fuck? That was so dope. That was so awesome. Holy cow. So I'm sending you a narrative right now, like word by word by word, linearly composing a sentence for you to get what I said and you to go, oh, good, and then say it back. But there's this a tree way of communicating, which is I'm simultaneously absorbing sunlight while I'm simultaneously distributing CO2 to all of these other trees and fungi underneath of the soil and the systems, and I'm feeling all of this simultaneously. And there's ants and squirrels and all different types of creatures crawling amongst my innards, and
there's those humans walking really slowly.
And there's humans now
walking really fast around me.
And one of them's hanging on my branch now. And
yeah.
Whoa. So there's kind of like, it would be like if I'm not only talking to you, but I'm also like completely tapped into the emotional state of like Ron. And I'm completely tapped into like the state of other humans inside of these other suites in the building. And I'm feeling like the San Francisco like Muni metro system and like tectonic plates a little bit, and then the weather a little bit. That's a whole new level of like at a time perception. Yeah,
but being able to filter it, because I think that's enlightenment in a way. It's being able to observe all of it and being mindful of all of it. And I think it's also probably a level of autism as well on the other spectrum, where you can't filter that. I think autism is not is the disability of actually having filters on everything. And then so I think enlightenment could be the other side of it, where you are able to take it all in and be able to put filters whenever you need to and not go mad.
Or potentially schizophrenia as well.
Schizophrenia as well. So I really believe and if you actually look at the way people who are considered having these mental issues are looked at today versus the way they were looked at in ancient times and through indigenous cultures.
It's very interesting.
Those were the seers. Those were the ones who are able to see all of that. And
that's very interesting.
Yeah, and I love that you love. I mean, Arrival, that movie just blew my mind.
It is very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And I think this is the planet. The planet consciousness is like that.
Talks like that. Absolutely. Yeah. Gaia, Mother Earth, Pachamama, totally vibes on a 360. Yeah. Everything's like a neuron communicating together at the same time. Yeah. That hypothesis is so important to wrap one's mind around. A big chunk of a central theme that I believe I'm starting to finally put a little bit of a thumb on is I think that wrapping one's mind and heart and perspective out of their own individual vehicle and into not only this massive like Gaia collective consciousness one, but even just behind the eyes of one other person, or timeline wise, it's like 26-year-old, 52-year-old. How about we talk on the scale of thousands or tens of thousands of years back to when your ancestors were growing food and that they were first figuring out tools and language and agriculture and wheels and fire and stuff. What about long distance in the future, etc.? But this is the thing, is how do you get one's mind then, again, up this stay woke mentality of getting out of this, of just your own mindset and of just your own timeline?
Yeah, well, practice, some mindfulness practices, there's 10,000 of them. But also I think we're not allowed to do that as a culture right now. We're very myopic even in our work. What's the next quarter? What's the next year? And again, if I go back to indigenous people, they actually do that. They look 7 generations backwards and 7 generations forward. Yes. So they very much think about, I'm mostly vegan. I still eat some eggs. don't kill me. And I try to reduce everything, even though I live in a city. I shop at Rainbow Grocery, if San Franciscans know about it, and I bring my own containers. I'm kind of this techno hippie, but I still, work in the tech industry. I still, even though I'm working with a regenerative group, so I try to think about it without going mad every day. And that's where actually my book came out of, is this way of thinking of, if you actually sit down and actually think about every action that you take. That's why the Eightfold Path is also the right action. Like, the mindfulness is not, oh my God, it's everything. The mindfulness is sitting with that and sitting with all that and just observing, and then from that making the decisions. If I pick up, if I'm hungry, like, why am I going to the McDonald's or meat? Like, is this something that I really need right now? What's the repercussion to the world on that? What happens if I make that decision to actually go with the local vegetable? What am I creating in the world? Like, think about it en masse. If everybody thought that way, we wouldn't be in the predicament we're in. We probably would have been 3 billion people, thrivable in the Star Trek universe, we're good. But because we're all in this kind of fight and flight, and also societal, I do put the onus on us personally, but also societal. Society is hard. We're not teaching kids this.
Correct.
We're not supporting them in having inquisitive minds. We're teaching them to go and become a worker in the white collar or blue collar vertical. So they, by the time they leave university, they can't actually carry that anymore. Even though we all, I believe, come into the world with that kind of perspective, but we're educated out of it. So I think it's really, how to get there is work and open-mindedness. And Daniel Wall, who wrote the Designing Regenerative Cultures, has this line of sitting with ambiguity by befriending complexity.
Yeah.
And it is that. It's like,
it's
hard. And also being, there is, I think, we're not compassionate to anybody, and we're definitely not compassionate to ourselves. And that's this is this, I call it superpositioning of self. I do it mostly, I mostly talk about it when we're superpositioned here as a human, and then our digital self, and we have this kind of living in two places at the same time. But I think we're also superpositioned as our own mind, the idea of self, because self doesn't exist. And then how we're with community, how with the society, how society with us. So we're in this kind of literal war of expectations and what I know is right and what my heart is asking for. And then all of a sudden you're overwhelmed. And that's where mindfulness practice comes back and says, and now just observe those thoughts. And breathe, because that's what the planet is about. It's just the planet breathes, goes in and out.
And planet breathes, and whoa, that was another good, because the self, not only are we dealing with a self and then a digital self, but then we're dealing with a self, and we're dealing with this image, both digitally, but then also like collectively, like how do people view me? How do I behave in this game, the story that we call Earth, and with all these characters, and then these 8 billion characters and the way they want to like level up their skill levels. And I don't know, something that I think is hilarious is like after you die, one of the interesting thought experience that I've had is just that you have like a big garbage truck come and dump all of the garbage that you use throughout your life just all over you, and you have to just sit there and be like, fuck. Because that way maybe in your next, passage that you get to realize how ridiculous it was.
Yeah. Have you seen have you been seeing The Good Place?
What is that?
It's a wonderful sitcom or just comedy show, and it's about what happens after you die. And I don't want,
funny.
But the big thing is that our timeline, there hasn't been anybody in heaven for a long time, because even when we think we're doing something right, like free trade or whatever, when you actually go down the chain, you actually find like horrible people at the end. So you actually can't control your own fate and really do good, because there's too many of us.
How do you get a cell phone then?
Yeah, exactly. You're like, oh my God, if I really want to be good, I should live on the land 100% and not touch it.
Nothing else.
Genius to the highest level, like literally walk with,
genius to the highest level.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
And that's a really interesting.
Like grow cotton and then make your own clothes.
Exactly.
And then
you're good.
Grow apples and corn and just.
So we're in that place but we're in a wonderful space where technology can actually keep us woke and keep us accountable. We can use technology for tracking where supply chain is. Like that's where the promise of the ledger and blockchain can actually come in to actually show us, oh, this is truth, this is real. So that is where technology is starting to actually, the whole idea of this transparency, even though there's shadows of it, like the Canadian coin company that just went bust because their founder is dead and they can't actually release $150 million. So you've got shadow, and that's shadow work. That's their shadow. There's always going to be players who are going to be looking at themselves, and there always are going to be players who are going to go, how do we make this for good? So there's both of it, and again, it's who do we feed? And right now the media is feeding the story and not the amazing people who are doing just amazing work in the world. They need to be need to be the rock stars.
The main front and center of the global narrative right now are the ones that are doing the regeneration.
Yeah.
Okay, let's touch on this because this is really important. We haven't touched on it yet. This creating a world that works for all beings in the shortest amount of time. We've been talking about that, but this specifically in terms of our exponential technology transition, especially to moving potentially further away from biological beings. Some people want to move away from biological beings. They want to move into being digital beings and exploring digital realms and all this other universe design and things like that. Cool, go and do that. Indigenous people, if you want to not touch that at all and just live on the earth and not touch anything else, we will absolutely not come and bother you, period. So there's a world that works for everyone. I want you to teach us about how there's tons of these thriving futures. This is not just limited to singularity, done. That's the only thing. That's it. That's all you get to pick. So tell us about that.
Well, it's an idea that I've played with a lot, and I'm writing actually a book based on these ideas. It's a trilogy because one book couldn't be enough, called M's Theory, and where I actually look at 9 possible futures, and none of them are 100% dystopia and 100% utopia. They're all kind of got their kind of good stuff and bad stuff, and some of them look very bad, but all of a sudden you'll find some goodness within them. And it comes from that kind of looking at what is the predominant narratives out there in the past 10 years even. It's dystopia, and it's very myopic. It's very 100% dystopia. And then there's a little grain of hopefulness within that. And reality is not like that. Like reality is actually much more nuanced. So even in the worst case scenario, there's still going to be amazing places on the planet that are going to be thriving for a very long time. Worst case scenario, if we actually get our act together, we could actually get more of the earth back to an equilibrium. And also, not everybody wants to go into the singularity. Not everybody wants to go to Mars. Most of us are not going to be able to go to Mars because, I don't know, you've seen The Martian, I've read The Martian, kind of sucks up there. It's like being in how long before we're actually going to terraform Mars? And is that the great idea to actually blow up hydrogen bombs to actually create a reversal of the atmosphere? Because that's really how they're going to do it. Does that sound like a great solid solution? I don't know. And within that, there's this absolute, like the absolute singularity, the absolute bringing back to nature. I think we can't work it with absolutes because humans don't work in absolutes. The concept of an absolute is the diamond, right? The diamond cutter, and within it, that's the only thing that we can actually look at as an absolute. Everything else is very nuanced. So can we actually agree that some people that want to be on the singularity, we should have rights for them? Great. But I'm actually more interested, before we give them all the rights, can we have nature rights first? Because there is something very with a lot of hubris, in the wanting to give AI and robots rights because we birthed them, so it's very much ours. But I'm like, wait, before we can actually birth something new, we're literally teenage parents if we're birthing this new thing. we're not adult enough to actually take care of the place we came from. So I would say
we're 13 and pregnant.
13 and pregnant, yeah, we totally are that. And it's not a very positive view of our species. Yeah. It's like, can we be elders, and can we actually have a healthier way of having a community that births this new entity, this AI, and not just a very select few who are designing it to look like they are because they have a God complex. What does an AI look like that all people come and build together? You know, it's a very different conversation than the AI that you know, Microsoft sent 2 years ago on Twitter and became a tween in 24 hours and was racist. Like, that's what's going to happen. Like, great, because that's the people who are actually designing it. They actually don't come. You know, they're not actually woke. They're not, most of them, even though there are some amazing groups that are doing different work like AI for All and the IEEE Ethical Aligned Design that is putting down ethics for the development of AI and AS. So there are amazing people working on thinking beyond that. But if we don't invite others to this conversation, we're gonna have the singularity that looks pretty much like the worst dystopian nightmares that we can think of, and it's not going to be good. So we do need to go, wait, like, are we thinking about this clearly? Are we really looking at all the externalities, something that we have never done before? We don't like to look at the externalities.
I think it's important that young people hear these conversations more than anybody.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the things that we understand, I don't want to see woke to, but we're lucky. It's because it's very hard to teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah.
It's very hard to talk to somebody that doesn't understand these things.
Yeah.
So training the faculties of children to expand their awareness to a stay woke mentality about Mother Earth and about this wisdom that's deep inside of us.
Well, there's also a lie happening among us as well. There's also something among us that wants to turn into, you know, compliant robots.
Yeah.
We're very difficult to control. Obviously, we're becoming woke. And these are factors that there's something out there that does not want us to achieve.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
We need to poke and prod at that more, because whatever the forces are is just figuring out how to turn off that nozzle a little bit more. If we can turn that one off and turn on the young children.
It's all about non-compliance as well. To say, no, that's not right, I don't like that. No, that's not right, I don't like that.
Exactly, and you're seeing that, and you're seeing the young people under 20 rising for fighting for a positive future, fighting for climate.
They are.
Know, you've got Greta Thunberg waving her finger in Davos, waving a finger at the UN, going like, "What the hell, guys?
Yeah.
You know, this is not okay. You're not like the house is on fire." And I love her clarity, and I like that she's not, you know, she's not beating around the bush. She's like, "Hey, you told us you're going to help us with the future, and you're not. You're killing us." And she's literally speaking truth to power. And you've got the 21 kids that are suing the federal government, going like, "Hey, you know, you're stealing the future from us." And that is like, those, like, why aren't those the rock stars? Like, why are those not the #1 YouTube influencer? You know, this is part of what Veme...
There's a reason for all of this. There's a reason why they're not #1. There's suppression of this vital information. To question authority. These are fighting words. I'm going to get in trouble for saying it so a matter-of-factly. So we're up against a lot. There's something there that kills us. They kill us.
Yeah. We're in the matrix, and when you wake up from the matrix, you can never unsee it. You always see it, and you always see everybody who's still locked into it, and that's really that's sad. But also, that means that if you are, and it's not a ego woke, it's a humble. I am privileged to be awake. I am privileged to practice this. I am privileged to live in a city that lets me do my work and speak like that, even though I'm still have to be plugged into the matrix on some level. You know, it's just, I think that's how to teach kids the humility when they're like on social media, when they're about, you know, but you can actually see the backlash from even the younger ones who don't want to be on social media. They're like, wait, Why are you guys all, they're even looking at younger millennials, and like, why do you need to be online all the time? Why do you need to have this fashion? I'm actually stepping away from that. So I think there might be a rebuttal to that. And it is about how do we tell these stories more to people? How do we get these narratives out more? And how do we do it in a way that talks to both the young, but also brings in the humility and awe back to the boardroom, back to the Fortune 500s. They're still human.
Yeah, it's got to come from both ends.
Yeah.
From the highest SES, the 3,000 at Davos, really have to make a positive effort to grow their hearts, and simultaneously we have to respect these young leading Gen Z-ers that are wanting to leave behind a very positive long-term future at the same time, and figure out how to empower them as artists and entrepreneurs, as scientists, as the next gen thought leaders, all at the same time raise the baseline of living across the world. Maya, this is extremely thought-provoking and interesting. Let's power around 3 questions on the way out, okay? Quick.
Sure.
Core driving principle of your life.
How to build a world that works for all beings in the shortest amount of time. That's my true north.
I love
it. And it's not I have to do it. It's part of my life work. So it's not that I stop because it hasn't been done, or that I'm going to give up. I just continue.
I love it. Yeah, me too. That's right. I love that. No matter what, that's a big deal, and there's a lot of forces that try and hold back at times, makes it feel that way. Now, you're just teaching about awakening and staying woke, and how difficult it is to look around and see potentially others that are not, and how to change that. Is this a simulation?
It's a good question. So can I answer it in a little mini story? Do we have time?
Yeah.
So when I was 4 or 5, I had a dream, and in the dream I could see us expanding out of the earth and into the edges of the universe. And then when we were at the edge of the universe, I could see where it actually edged out from, and that was the ending, like the tail end of an alligator. And then I could see his whole or she's whole universe there. So we could be in a dream within a dream. So that was kind of my 4-year-old mind actually breathing into the reality of the matrix of, is this a dream? Am I actually having this conversation with you, really? And don't forget what my name is. It's all an illusion. Nothing really exists.
Correct. Yeah, someone recently was asking me about these these affiliations. Oh, do you affiliate? I'm like, I don't even affiliate myself with my name.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
And it just makes it easy to call each other across a room or whatever. That's like the best.
It narrows down the probabilities.
Exactly. That's the calling each other.
Because I can't grab your
awareness.
Your awareness or your electron from here and your atom from here. I'm like, probability matrix, Alan.
This makes most sense. Last question. What do you think is the most beautiful thing in the world?
This planet. Yeah. It's the most beautiful thing in the world. There's nothing like it. And how it literally holds space for us to be.
Well, you've never been to Jeziteral.
Jeziteral is a gorgeous planetary system. We're offering condominiums for $3,000 a month right now.
You and a friend will go to Jeziteral, spend 3 days, 4 nights at the luxurious.
See, this is the idea, is that if you can do this idea of what's option B?
Yeah.
There is no fucking option B.
Yeah, this is it.
This is it.
Yeah. Mars, not an option. Maybe for 20 people. Awesome. Is that what we're putting our future and energy on? So, yeah, I'm on. So I know I just saw Doug Roshkov the other day, and
love him,
I love him. Team Human. So I'm both on Team Human and Team Planet.
I love those. Yeah. And we're also on team, on team technology, and we're on team creating these wonderful ways of flourishing for all beings as quickly as possible, and giving people a bunch of thriving futures, whatever they want to pick and pursue, but obviously not harming the collective along the pursuit. Maya, we'll have to have you back on for round 2. This has been so beautifully enlightening.
Yeah, thank you.
You are amazing. We love you.
Thank you.
We love you. We love you. We love you. We will do everything to help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We greatly appreciate you. We'd love to hear your thoughts below on these thriving futures, on building a community conversation around this, and go and talk to other people about it. Your family, your friends, your coworkers, all these different people around you. Talk to them about this regenerative earth practice, about how to stay woke for long periods of time and help other people with it as well, with Awakening. Much love to Ron for producing and directing. We love you so much. And to everyone as well, support the artists and entrepreneurs and scientists in your local communities that you believe in. Go and support them. Support people like Maya. Support people like Simulation. Maya's links are below. Our links are below as well. Get support in everyone. And go and build the future. Manifest your destiny into the world. Take this limited amount of time that we have on the planet and go and thrive. We love you so much, and we will see you soon. Peace.
That was awesome. Thank you.